We should do a podcast at the company. That would actually be pretty interesting. When we think about, in one of the things we did this summer, we did an engagement survey. And, part of the reason that we're traveling this week and going around and talking at each one of our sites, because some of that feedback was about communication.
Yeah.
And we know that we're scattered. We've got people in Ohio. We've got people in Nashville, Charlotte, Raleigh, wrapping up in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah.
We have people that work remotely. We're kind of everywhere. So it is hard sometimes to get the message out.
Yeah.
But, I always wonder about okay, well, we put that out there, we create that content. Who's actually going to consume it? Are our employees going to do it or not?
Yeah. So the nice thing is there's a lot of companies that have done it already. So you're not the first. It has been, I think, a proven media. I don't want to say proven, but Sargent up in Maine, they've done it really successfully, and theirs is available for anybody. So you can just, I'll send that one to you just as like an example. Or Dan Garcia with CW Matthews does one. There's a bunch of contractors. I know Tim with Emery Sapp and Sons, purely just for internal communication. Just kind of talk about what the heck's going on in the business, because you can, how it is. You get so focused on one project, you think that's your world and that's all that happens here.
Yeah,
you have no idea what's going on elsewhere.
Right.
And there's potentially, if nothing else, it just makes you feel like more of a team, I guess. And oh, wow, there's like a bigger picture to the whole highway thing than just my project that's completely screwed up this week. Not saying any
we
of
don't
your
have any projects that get screwed up.
Yeah, not saying that would ever happen to you all, but it's easy to just get a little down sometimes and a little isolated.
Yeah.
And it's nice too. It's perfect for construction because there's a lot of windshield time. And you can just put it on while you're driving. And so I think that's why it's been very popular with construction companies, and actually is pretty successful with a lot of companies because of the windshield time.
So some of those companies that do it, do they have guests on, or they try to keep it internal?
So it's all internal purposes, but some of them will have external guests. Some of them will have internal guests. Hey, here's so-and-so from within the business. We're going to talk about safety today, for example. Here's, if you're, maybe you're whoever runs your shop, for example, we're going to talk about equipment today. So you can have guests, and you could make it fun and a different kind of format every time. And then worst case scenario too with podcasts, you sit down, like startup costs is maybe a few $100s, maybe. Yeah. You sit down, record it, you listen back to it. That was terrible. You just delete it.
Right.
Like it's not, you're not sinking a lot into it.
Right.
But yeah, I'm a huge proponent of any construction company doing a podcast. I think it's wildly valuable.
Okay.
Especially with a company like yours. With me just being so spread out, it is so tough.
Yeah.
How, you said you got some feedback on communication?
Yeah.
How did you gather that feedback?
So we used, the history of surveys at Highway Paving. 3 years ago, we considered doing some kind of engagement survey.
Yeah.
And at that time, just the timing wasn't quite right. We didn't have much of a HR tech stack, right? So people weren't used to potentially taking a survey in that way. And it's like, oh, why don't you just distribute it on paper and, have everybody collect or, respond that way. And I'm like, I'm not tallying up 100 responses to a survey on paper. So it's going to have to be done with some kind of technology. Started looking at that time at some different options. And then the second question was, okay, if we do this and we find out some things, are we going to actually do something as a leadership team to address it? Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was like, yes. And it would really be nice to probably just get a little bit more comfortable. Let's see what's actually happening in 2021. Let's wait just a little bit. So we had actually just started to implement our first HRIS, Bamboo. Mm-hmm. And in Bamboo, they have an employer net promoter score, ENPS.
Yeah.
And so that was actually, I was like, well, this is great. It's included as part of this. Why don't we just send that out and see what happens? So we did our first survey in the summer of 2021. We got really good feedback. And, it's one question and then open form just for verbatim comments.
And I believe the question is, how likely are you to recommend
Highway Paving
X company, Highway Paving as
a place to work to your friends and family, or whatever the tagline is. And if And the way the Net Promoter works, basically, I think it's a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter, right? So you're in the green.
Mm-hmm.
A 7 or an 8 is neutral. And then anything 6 or below, you're potentially a detractor.
Okay.
So, we get that raw score, which was always actually fairly positive, and then good written comments. And then we could tag those and we could kind of see what themes were actually popping up. And even at that time, we had communication, we had schedule. I would say that we're pretty lucky that we didn't get a lot in terms of reward and recognition and compensation. Like some people would mention it. I think we've resolved some of those problems. There wasn't a lot on training and development. And, you think about employee surveys, typically there's probably 3 themes that pop up all the time, right? I don't get paid enough.
Sure.
I have no room for growth. Can't develop. I can't learn. And then, a third one, which is very company dependent, right? And industry dependent in terms of what would actually be. So we didn't actually see a lot of those first 2 themes. Ours was more about the communication piece. So fast forward to this past summer, it's like, okay, we're growing quite a bit. We've almost doubled our workforce in a year. We need to get a little bit more granular feedback. So we went back to some of the companies we looked at in 2020. One of those is Culture Amp, who has an engagement survey and then just a very nice survey tool. I was impressed with them. They seem like a good partner. So we actually used their kind of core engagement survey to get all that feedback.
Okay.
We added in some additional questions about safety. But yeah, it was positive. I wouldn't say it was necessarily super eye-opening. We got similar themes to what we had gotten from doing the ENPS, but it was nice to break down in the more granular responses. And one of the factors that's in there is about leadership. And a lot of leadership ones connect directly to communication, making sure that that message from leadership is being passed down throughout the organization. And from an engagement perspective, they weren't the lowest items on the survey, but from an engagement perspective and the way that they actually analyze those factors, it's one of the factors that most impacts engagement work. So I was like, oh, that's what we need to focus on. We still need to get our communication piece right. We need to get that leadership message, make sure we're explaining our vision, where we are as a company, all the things you were just saying that a podcast could potentially do for us. That's kind of what became apparent to us in doing that survey.
Yeah, I will. And I don't know if we've already explored this with you guys too, through Build with Training, but are you on Build with Training?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. I record for our team basically just a 5-minute video on my phone every week. Here's what happened this week. Here's what's going on.
And you put it in that platform?
Yeah, and you can put it in Build with Training and assign it to everybody weekly. And keep it real simple, real concise from your phone. No production quality, nothing. I do that every Sunday. And I think that's made a big difference too, in at least informing everybody.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And
I always forget about that function of the platform.
Yeah.
Of producing all these videos and just put it on the website and make it short and linked. It's like,
that's
put
our
it in
fault.
there.
Yeah, it's our fault because we're not good at, we haven't been good at really educating on what the potential uses are outside of take people through basic safety.
Right.
But yeah, it's and I think we're working on features now to just make it so you can upload it directly onto the platform from your phone. Because right now I have to take it from my phone, put it on my computer, then upload it. So it's not as seamless, but still it takes me 15 minutes to create one nice communication for the entirety of the business. Not everybody will see it, but a lot of people will see it.
Right.
And I make it really valuable. So it's, hey, you're going to be behind if you're not listening to this.
Yep.
And just try to keep it. I write out my bullet points beforehand, and then just here's the main points for this week. That's it.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you bring up Bamboo and feedback. We've been on Bamboo. We're probably going to do something different, as like you said, as far as feedback's concerned, because the EMPS, is it helpful? Sure, but no at the same time. But we just did it. And it's nothing. See, human nature. I get the feedback in a spreadsheet, ranked best to worst. So then your 10s are up top, and then your lowest scores at the bottom.
Right.
I don't ever start at the top. I just scroll all the way down to the bottom and start.
You got to start at the top. You got to celebrate those wins.
Oh, no.
Like, oh, people said really nice things.
No, it's like, great. All right, cool. I'm happy you love it here. But let's see what the absolute.
But I don't care about
stuff.
you that much.
No,
it's more about these people down here.
I make it up to the top. I cherish every great response, but I go right down to the bottom.
Yeah.
It's just human nature, and it's it's a nice kick in the nuts first time you read it. You're like, that just doesn't feel good. That just
Right.
But then you start to digest it and reflect upon it. And you're like, okay, so here's the key themes, and is this really surprising? No, like I get it. Like one of our biggest themes on the past one was we've had a lot of instability as a business. We're a startup.
Yeah.
And we press we have 5.5 years of history, which is fine, but we pressed the reset button beginning of last year when we became a software company. And so in a lot of ways, we're not even 2 years old yet in really how our business is structured today. And that has caused all kinds of chaos. And there were a lot of people that were signed up before then that signed up for a very different operation.
Right.
That then got thrown into this crazy startup environment.
Yep.
That just don't align with that environment because it's completely different. And I totally get that. And then there's a lot of people that have come in knowing it's a startup environment. Like, this is what I want. I want to go build something. I want chaos. This is how I thrive. But that was definitely, I would say, the number one theme of our recent survey was stability, which understood, and we're trying to figure out how best to get there.
I think surveys are obviously a very good thing to do because it's a structured way to get feedback from your team, from your organization.
Yeah.
But you do absolutely have to approach it with, okay, feedback is a gift. Yes. All of that. But then you also have to look at it from kind of that filter of, okay, there's some things that we can and can't control.
Sure.
So where do we actually focus in on that? And, that's the instability piece, right? That is, something that it's a conscious choice that you've made as a business.
Yes.
And there are also things that we have like that on our survey, right? When we think about schedule, when we think about the work-life balance, just because of the way that we do operate in so many different places with, pretty crazy schedules on our jobs, but would I love to wave a magic wand and make that all better? Yes.
32-hour work week.
Yeah. 32-hour work week and, instant teleportation to your home. I would love to make that happen for you. But unfortunately, really hard to do. And when you're working outside all the time and we have no, kind of vertical construction where we could even duck underneath a cover, right? If it's raining, we cannot pave concrete.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there's just a lot of factors in there, and we just have to kind of take that with a grain of salt of like, yes, I hear you. And then there's the authenticity piece, right? And the making sure that we actually do something with that survey data.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you complain about it, or even though you're saying it's an opportunity, we might not be able to actually do anything about it, right? We'll do what we can. We'll try to mitigate some of those things, but it's not necessarily a solvable problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, you do have to take a lot of it with a grain of salt too. And then, sometimes there's people within an organization that probably shouldn't be there and they might be frustrated or upset or whatever it is. They're more likely to give you feedback than people that are happy. So at the same time, you get a lot of negative feedback and it's like, yeah, understood. But at the same time, you kind of have to understand. It's like, well, let's be careful with how much we actually listen to this. We need to be measured about it at least.
Right.
What kind
of response rate did you get on your survey?
So we screwed up on this one. We weren't clear on the why we needed it filled out. And so mistake number one, leadership, just dumb mistake. We weren't clear in our communication about it going out in the first place and why we wanted the response rate to be great. So we probably had like 40 out of 70 submit a response.
Still good sample size, right?
It's a good enough sample size. And we figured if we would have reopened it and communicated more clearly and said everybody needs to do it, we probably would have got the exact same themes. So it's like, all right, I feel good enough about the sample size.
Right.
I don't think anything is all that different.
Yep.
And then But through this, we then learned, okay, we need to do this differently on the next time.
Mhm.
So how can we make this more effective on the next go around? So I think the next go around, like you were saying with your most recent feedback, I think will be a lot more effective because it'll be more granular and more actionable.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's such a, as Jocko says, a dichotomy of leadership, because you want to listen to everybody and implement their feedback. But at the same time, you're working under constraints, and you're one of the few people at your organization that has the big picture perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see, while they're looking at one game board, a job, you're looking at 7 different game boards and the 7 future game boards, and then maybe some game boards beyond that.
Right. And
from your perspective, the picture is just completely different.
Yeah.
So your work is very interesting because, as you said, you work under these crazy constraints.
Yeah.
And as a construction business and a paving business, working for DOTs, you're under constraints. There are definitely some bounds, but you all are in a different league of constraints, and that is the airport world, which is a gnarly world.
Yes. Though, it's so interesting you said that, because, and I never really think about that much of, like, I know obviously like FAA specs when it comes to our mix designs, when it comes to just the tolerances of the work that we do are obviously, there, lots of constraints, right? Very, very tight, very regulated, very scrutinized. It never really occurred to me, though, and actually Dustin, I think, said it yesterday when we were talking to our team here in Nashville, that, if you're doing DOT work and you're paving a highway and you go, and not saying, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, right? But you go like a foot off, right? That road's still going to go. People are still going to be driving on it.
Sure.
You'll be able to have a chance probably to even correct that a little bit. Like, the tolerances are just not quite the same. I was like, oh, wow, that is so true, because you can't pave a runway a foot off. If you do, people's lives are potentially in danger because there's giant planes landing on that, right?
Yeah.
If it's an inch off or an inch higher than it should be, also an issue when it comes to, plane instrumentation and landing and just all of that. And then just the sheer force that those, you have 737 or 747, even worse, landing on one of those airstrips, as it were, like the repeated force of that, like, you better do a really good job. So yes, that made it really just clear to me yesterday in him making that comment. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Like I realized, but I never realized it to that extent.
Well, and just the money you're dealing with, in a sense that the airport needs to run. You can't turn the airport off. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And so you do your work, like in road construction, a lot of times you have to keep interstate open, but you can move interstate traffic, you can shut stuff down, you can do, it's a little bit more flexible. But if, the airport needs to operate and they don't care about what needs to really get done in the grand scheme of things. Their priority is to operate and get air traffic in and out.
Right.
And so you're secondary and you have to fit within their constraints most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time. So, hey, here's the window you have.
Yeah.
And there's not much wiggle room.
Right.
You just kind of have to make it work.
If I-75 doesn't open for a few days, American Airlines isn't knocking on your door and being like, hi, we can't go anywhere.
Sure.
So that's, and that adds to the complexity of our schedules. That adds to the complexity of communicating with our workforce as well, because we've, we got to go do maintenance and we need to do something in a very tight period of time at night, right? Or we can't deal with all of the actual plane traffic or the air traffic that's going on around us. We have to work at night, or we have a very short period during the day, or we can only close that runway for 60 days and you got to do work around it. And if you're not done by then you're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
You're paying liquidated damages, or just worse yet, you're going to be probably kicked off of a job. So.
Yeah, it is. It's high risk, but I guess it's the world in which you operate. So at the same time, you all don't really know a lot different at this point. It's just what you do. Like,
Right.
yeah,
we've been so focused on the airfield paving piece, and really our vision is to become the premier airfield paving contractor in the U.S. and that could even expand to the world or just contractor in general. Right.
Yeah.
We really enjoy doing that work. To some extent, we think it's safer because you don't have to deal with the traveling public.
Sure.
You're within a tight, contained space.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is a little bit. There's not a lot of elbow room, but there's also not a lot of things going on around it that can go wrong.
Yeah.
So from a safety perspective, it's great. We've gotten comfortable with those tolerances that are there on the technical side and, in actually building the product. We have fantastic managers that are constantly monitoring that, constantly working with the airports, with our owners to make that work happen and to recognize what changes there are going to be and figure out ways that we can do it better for them, on budget, on time, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's out of all of the paving surface work I've seen, airport's probably my favorite because it's just so unique and you have planes right next to you.
Right.
And which is just the cool factors.
Right. It will never not be cool to be on like a ramp or an apron or a runway or whatever, even if it's closed down completely. Like it's a really cool experience.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a cool factor there that you don't get on road work. And it's just, the tolerances and everything is so tight. And I've been to a few more airport jobs, but the two paving specific airport jobs I've been to were very, very, very unique. And so I'm basically taking that and just assuming everything's like that, which is not at all the case. But one of them was Switzerland International Airport, where they were replacing the runway and removing the concrete and replacing it with asphalt. But they couldn't stop daily air traffic. It was the main runway and so they had to have planes landing on it every day, but they had to replace it.
Wow.
And so they had to divide it into 70 sections and replace one section per night. And the coordination was, I don't think I'll ever see anything quite like it again.
Right.
It was so spectacular because it's airport work 1, 2. It's the Swiss. They know what they're doing.
Right.
It's probably the finest construction I've seen. And it's just absolutely beautiful. But I mean, within 5 minutes of the last 737 hitting the runway, they have 2 85-ton excavators out there with hammers already poking holes in the concrete and pulling it up. And then they bring all the asphalt in before they start and put it in a warming tent. So we're not dealing with the plant. The plant, the truck breakdowns, none of that. We're just going to remove that variable and put it all on site before we even start. And then they did majority of the paving with the bulldozer. So they had a D6 with triple grouser pads with excavator pads on it and a sprayer system to keep the asphalt from sticking on the tracks and a special blade. And it did the first, 10, 12 inches. And then they had 2 pavers that would do the surface.
Wow.
It was so remarkable.
The crazy thing about that is think about how many things could have gone wrong.
Yes.
Too.
Yes.
Right. Even just, I think the one thing about highway and this industry overall is it seems like there's this factor of luck to what we do. Right. And we just got lucky that we were able to win that job. We got lucky that we were able to complete it on time. We got lucky, but it's not really luck, right? It's that you do have pretty ingenious people managing those jobs, thinking about all of those factors. You're talking about the bulldozer and, a water spraying system over the treads. Like,
it's amazing.
Who came up with that?
Yeah, but like, there's some contractors out there where their strategy is largely dependent upon luck.
Sure.
But you can't do that when you're dealing with airports.
Right.
It just doesn't,
and you can't do that.
Work.
Right. And that's another thing with us is, and we focus on that a lot of, we were good at kind of staying at our same size, working in the same places that we were working. But we also recognize that might just be lucky. We need we need to remove some of the luck from that equation, right?
Yeah.
And that's really like where we are kind of on our journey as a company of, okay, we gotta build some more foundational stuff for our business to actually grow. And I think that, there's a lot of contractors out there that probably have gotten where they are right now because of luck, or maintaining where they are because of luck.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to work that out of their system.
I like too how you all are focused and disciplined on a specific kind of work. I've seen that most of the most successful contractors I know do have one of two plays. They're either vertically integrated and they do everything, so they control the schedule, and that controlling the schedule, I think that's the secret there, is the schedule is theirs and no one else touches it.
Yep.
That it's big time. And then you have the whole materials are widely profitable and it's kind of a monopoly, but we'll just,
wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's put that to the side. And then contractors that are specialized, that do one thing extraordinarily well. And I've seen that because it's so tempting to just for our business, for any business, there's opportunity everywhere. You just want to go grab it. And especially when you have this survival mindset, like when you're like, it's like the human body. We're just wired to eat all the time because, oh my God, I just need to get as many calories in me as I can because I have no idea when those extra calories are coming. That's not how the world works anymore.
I feel very seen
right
now, Aaron. Thank you.
We're still wired to just consume because we who knows what tomorrow's going to bring. And I think contractors, especially when they start, you want backlog. You just want to consume, but then it starts to work against you in a lot of ways. And then you're kind of controlled by the backlog and stuff you probably shouldn't have bid, and it can make a mess.
Especially if you're a subcontractor, right? Because just going back to what you said about the schedule, that is a key piece. And I was listening to you say that, and I was like, well, what if I told you that we really try to take both of those approaches, right?
Yeah.
We've specialized the concrete paving piece. We don't pave asphalt. Okay, we do a little bit of dirt work. We do a little bit of pipe. We do a little bit of just the overall kind of grading.
Yeah.
However, it's not our hedgehog, right? It's not, to use Jim Collins' term, right?
Sure.
It's more of if we need to. However, we've also found jobs and found places where we can work as the prime contractor. So where we can self-perform all of that concrete paving, and then there's a good enough portion of other work that we can either sub out because we're still in control of the schedule.
Yeah.
But then it's also finding, could we live that way? Sure. But if we want more work, we also have to go in as a subcontractor. So that's where we look at partners, right? That's where we make good relationships with our owners. That's where we find the people that the construction management companies or the other primes out there that are good partners, who we know will help support us and help us kind of continue on our goals. And
there's a lot that aren't good partners. There's a lot that are good partners. There's a lot that aren't good partners.
Yep.
There's a lot of it's an increasing problem that I don't think is talked about enough. Everybody, and I haven't found out the way to actually like constructively talk about it yet, but there's a lot of construction managers out there that don't create a lot of value, that try to put that want their percentage and then want to take the risk and go put it onto everybody else. And it's not really a partnership. It's,
it's management.
Yeah. You do what I say. And if you don't, I'll find someone else that will. Whereas I think they create real value. The good contractors, the good construction managers, partners, firms, whoever they are, they do look at it like, hey, we are nothing without the people building the work. We don't actually build work. So we don't actually do anything billable. Like, because the only billable thing on that project is concrete paving. It's not management. And sure, there's, you can put some stuff in your bid, but you get paid to build stuff.
Yep.
And I think some have forgotten that. It's hey, and even sometimes at companies, it's easy to you're in the office and you're so disconnected from, no, the company is not about you. You don't, you don't do anything billable here. It's about putting concrete on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, you need to help put concrete on the ground. Help your people put concrete on the ground as effectively as possible.
Right.
That's it.
That is 100% correct. It is so interesting to flip it around from, the CM side to, internal. That's the same. So I've had the great fortune and opportunity to be able to build my team, our people and talent team at Highway. And, even when it was me and Andrea, our talent manager and recruiter, we were pretty clear on what we do. And that is two things. Like, our mission as a team is to make this a great place to work, right? Help our managers make it a great place to work, help build projects and, foundational things to make it a great place to work, etc. The other part, though, is enabling the work, right? And that is something that I try to focus on all the time, because when we're referred to as HR and we're the roadblock, we've done something wrong, right? And that's a spot that we've tried to shy away from. And, I think that we're pretty lucky. Like, our team, our people and talent team, our finance team, kind of our other support functions around the company, I think really still focus on that. Like, we are here to enable the work. We're not here to stand in the way.
Yeah.
And if we make it hard for you to get the work done, again, we've done something wrong.
Yeah.
Will that inevitably happen from time to time? Maybe, because of, laws and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But,
but
there's still that element of, like, whenever we can make a decision that's focused on enabling the business and enabling the activity that needs to actually happen to run our business and to do what we really are supposed to do, pave concrete, manage projects, that's where we want to focus. And that's what we do, what we try to do.
Well, and that's where communication again comes into play. There are laws that you have to abide by.
Sure.
That do make some things more difficult.
Yep.
But then that's where here's why we have to do it this way.
Yep.
Here are the constraints we're underneath, and even just communicating that clearly. Oh, okay, I understand. So now I'm not thinking that you're making my job harder.
Right.
I understand where you're coming from. Okay. All right, cool.
Right.
But that's on you to communicate that clearly.
Yep.
And if you don't, it causes all this.
Yeah, it's an outside-in kind of approach to it, right? And something I tell anybody that I interview for a role on our team or that I just talk to about Highway is that relationships are really, really important. Mm-hmm. Internally, but that is kind of the inside-out perspective, because we focus on that with our owners. We focus on that with our subcontractors. Yeah. We, whoever else we're working with, we want strong relationships, and we've got to also flip that on the inside. I've hired. Again, my team has grown, it feels like, exponentially this first half of the year. And something I feel like I've told all of them is focus on the relationships. Figure out how you're going to build those internally so that when you do have to have the tough conversations, make the tough decisions, you're going to be able to do that a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And even, it's just thinking about your guys' business too, from a relationship standpoint, you're really dependent on those relationships with owners, especially.
Yep.
And it only takes one person screwing up one relationship potentially to really set you back across the board.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a very small world.
Mm-hmm.
and everybody talks.
Mm-hmm.
And word can get around.
You got to be
quickly.
real careful who you piss off.
Yeah. And so it can work with you if you're doing a great job,
right.
Which it has. But it just takes one stupid decision from one person to set the whole organization back.
Sure.
Yeah. So on the people development side, you said it's grown substantially. What does that look like?
So, 3 years. So the other thing about this, I'm so a newcomer to Highway, right? Even after 3 years and being pretty deeply embedded in the business, like, I still feel like, okay, I'm the new guy.
Yeah.
A little bit.
What's your background?
Oh boy. How long is this podcast? How long do we have? No,
we can go all day.
So let me try to give you the summary of my background. My bachelor's degree is actually music education. I was a teacher for 5 years.
No kidding.
In between my first and second and fifth year of teaching, I worked for a small company that did training and development, consulting, instructional design. And really how I got there was that first year of teaching. It did not go great. And any first year teacher probably knows what I'm talking about. Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to, work with these kids. It's going to be awesome.
Sure.
And then it's about day 1, hour 2, and you're like, oh my God, I have to do this 180 days now. And
yeah.
So I had a tough go kind of my first year of teaching and just first year teacher stuff. But I said also to myself at that time, I don't know if I want to do this for 35 years of my life. This is kind of this is hard. So I had an opportunity to kind of leave, and I was talking with a friend. He said, you can do other things with your degree. I know a guy that does some training and development stuff. Why don't you talk to him? I was like, I don't know about that. This was over spring break. And I went back to school the day after spring break. And I came home from school, and I reached out to that friend again. I was like, you know what? I will talk to him because, I don't think I want to do this for 35 years. So I did that. I had that taste of kind of like business and leadership and, knowing what training and development can do for organizations or what we want it to do in the most positive of senses.
Yeah.
But fell back into another teaching job, still was doing some consulting on the side, and said, okay, I want to go get a master's degree in something. Maybe an MBA, maybe, focus a little bit more on organizational behavior or IO psychology or something like that. And, even at that time I was thinking, well, maybe I want to go get a PhD and teach in higher education. So I ended up in OSU's Master of HR program. Great experience. Was still kind of thinking about, well, maybe I'll parlay this into, some kind of PhD program after that. But after like the first 6 months of the year, I'm like, you know what? I'm too old for this shit. I'm not going to be able to read that many articles from journals here over the next 6 years of trying to get a PhD and then maybe end up at a tier 1 institution to teach. So like, I'm also learning all this cool stuff in this program. I want to go apply that somewhere. So I told myself, okay, I don't want to be too old. I got a house here in Columbus area. I don't want to be in a rotational program, which was a lot of kind of leadership development programs for HR, and where my peers who were 23, 24 in that program, where they were headed. And I also don't really want to work in a plant, right? Like I want to tech sounded exciting, right? Like a startup,
Sure,
would love to do that.
Yeah. Why not?
Somehow I ended up in both of those things, working with Ford in their HR rotational program. So I spent 2 years at the Lima engine plant in Ohio, and then 2 years supporting the finance skill team up in Dearborn.
Interesting.
And then a year working with Ford Smart Mobility, which was kind of the technology arm, kind of pre-autonomous vehicles where they could split that off.
Yeah.
So super interesting work. Really grateful for that time. Went back to doing some more training and development and actually some marketing consulting and work for a couple of years, and then kind of fell back in to this more, I'm not even going to say traditional HR role, right? It was knowing Dustin and talking about some opportunities that they had and where he wanted to take the business, starting as a consultant and kind of identifying a couple of the, like, hey, we really need to focus on talent acquisition. If you want to grow, if you want to make this a little bit more sane, you need to get a recruiter, you need to get an ATS.
Yeah.
Here's a steps and a process for actually doing that. So it was June of 2020 that I came on full time with Highway, kind of working in that capacity, really focusing on the talent acquisition piece at that time, but knowing that if we did want to grow and we wanted to reach the goals that Dustin and Ed and the other leaders kind of had at that time, we would need to build out some infrastructure. We would need to build out some processes. We would need to just be prepared for growth as a company.
I want to go in that direction, but I want to derail you for a moment.
Right.
Have you been following the UAW strikes?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
What do I think about the UAW strikes?
Yeah.
I got to be real careful here.
Yeah, I know that's a tricky question, but having been at Ford, like, and within HR,
sure,
like, you have a unique perspective on that subject.
Yeah. I got to think about how to tactfully answer that and talk about it. Because I have my own opinions that probably aren't real productive.
Yeah.
But
it's an
I'll tell you
opinion
off the
nonetheless.
record some things later. But here's what I'll say. I really hope that the workers get what they want, right? They are hardworking people. Overall, though, I feel like it's also a bit of attack at kind of the overall organization. Maybe attack's a strong word.
Yeah.
Right. But, I get concerned where negotiation isn't actually negotiation anymore. And it gets construed into, we want all this stuff. And that can happen on both sides, either side. Right. And I think that it probably is a little bit. They're getting possessive about what each side wants.
Sure.
But I actually don't think that they're as far apart as they make it out. There's a lot of lip service and there's a lot of kind of, marketing to get one side, above the other in terms of popular opinion.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like, of course, you want the hardworking people to get what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are constraints, business constraints, that are just the reality on how you operate a business. And the American automotive manufacturers have a colorful past across the board, especially financially, and they're by no means should be up on a pedestal. The United Auto Workers, same thing. Like not this impenetrable organization of justice and righteous behavior. It's on both sides. It's on both sides, and that's why they elected this new guy, because they recognized a lot of the corruption they had. They're like, hey, we can't
fix it.
Yeah, we really got to fix this. Like you could read about it. It's all very up in the air. But it is interesting because I feel like Ford is the closest. It sounds like, or that's who knows. But they said they're kind of being held hostage right now.
I read something on LinkedIn this morning, and I'm sorry I don't have the attribute. I can't attribute who's actually said it, and I'm going to paraphrase in a horrible way. But it was basically that, during the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, GM took a bailout. Ford did not.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting post because it was almost like saying that, hey, UAW, help us out a little bit here.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Keep going after GM.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Stellantis.
Which I thought was a really interesting way to position kind of from the upper management, the senior leadership of Ford, like how they're talking about the strike. But, so GM took a bailout, Ford didn't. Over the past 10 to 15 years, Ford has added X number of UAW jobs. GM has cut X number of UAW jobs. I was like, oh, that's an interesting standpoint. And then kind of wrapping up with Ford needs a strong UAW. UAW needs a strong Ford.
Sure. From
a profitability standpoint. So
interesting.
Throw us a little bit of a bone here, right? Recognize that you are going to get quite a bit. The latest proposal was pretty lucrative for everybody.
Yeah.
It addresses a lot of your concerns, but you're not going to get everything. And if you think you will, you're going to sit out there on the sidelines and striking longer and longer. And who's really going to suffer? It's going to be the suppliers who are small, mid-sized businesses who have, that's going to impact hundreds of thousands of jobs, and they have zero recourse, right? So I thought that was just an interesting kind of take on it of like, hey, you're hurting other people by continuing to strike by not coming to the middle. Now, UAW is going to have a different take on that as well, right? They want to get rid of tiers. They want to get rid of, and they just want it to be more equitable. They're going to always point to Mary Barra's salary and say, well, she makes, $110,000 a day or whatever it is. And, if we just took a portion of that, then the strike would probably be over, right?
Sure.
And to some extent, they probably have a point, right? That the EO pay, and they're sensitive to that, and they should be pushing that to some extent. But
yeah, they should be pushing it, but at the same time, it's like, does that really make all that much of a difference? Like, no, I get it. It's like optics, but then even the CEOs that don't get paid very much, in theory, there's all these other tricks.
Oh, yeah.
To get paid a ton of money.
Right.
It's not as blatant.
Yeah, right. It's not about the cash compensation. It's about the stock. It's about the perks. It's about the private jet. It's about this. Yeah.
It's fascinating though. It really is fascinating. I'm working on kind of like my latest talk. For whatever reason, these associations keep inviting me back to talk, and I don't know why, but there's a historical precedent. I think it was the 14th century with the Black Death, the plague in Europe, what happened was it wiped out half the population, and a lot of working class people were more impacted by this than the nobility. And then Europe rebounds and needs to develop itself, but the power dynamic shifted, and the peasants started to recognize that, wait a minute, they actually need us more than we need them now. And they started to exercise that newfound power and started to shift the balance of power substantially within the worker, employer, employee,
and the caste,
and relationship.
Yep.
And there was a lot of unrest. And even if you just look at the past year and look at how many strikes there have been over the past year, big strikes compared to even just the past decade.
Right.
Totally different dynamic. And I think the employers that just keep going down the traditional status quo path are at a substantial disadvantage and just substantial. I think that's very risky to do because they're basically ignoring that power dynamic that I think has existed for decades in construction is the same.
Yep.
It is not at all the same. It is completely different nowadays. Individuals, I think, have the power, and they only have it in a greater and greater sense going forward since everybody's hiring. And with where the numbers are going, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Right.
And they can exercise that power. And so as an employer, you can sit around and say, well, just these people, they're greedy, they're entitled, this and that. It's them. It's not us.
They just want to sit at home and collect paychecks.
Yeah. It's them. Like, they're the problem. But then, their workforce continue, their problem persists. So it's like, at what point do you say, okay, we've done it really successfully up until now, but there's a very different dynamic here, and let's work with it rather than against it.
Right.
Because everybody wins as a result.
So when we started kind of our journey 3 years ago of, okay, we're going to get on an applicant tracking system. We're going to really take this recruiting and talent acquisition thing seriously. The first phenomenon that we kind of found was, and we've experienced it really since then, is just kind of this concept of candidates ghosting us, right?
Yeah.
And, we'll talk to them. They're supposed to show up and then they just disappear, right? They evaporate into thin air. And a lot of people were very willing to step forward and offer their explanation or why they thought that was happening. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what the reason is or what conspiracy theories we all have about why it's happening. It's happening, so we have to deal with it.
Correct.
And I think that, just that's a good kind of metaphor, right? Or just a thing that can kind of continue from that trend of, we know history is going to repeat itself, right? Yes, workers are going to not necessarily rise up, right? But there certainly is going to be a different emphasis on our workforce in terms of what they want and what kind of power that they actually want to have and that they should have in many instances. And instead of just sitting back and throwing our hands up and being like, well, these kids these days just don't want to work and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. It's the reality that we actually have to manage with. And we have to let's direct our energy and focus on being constructive and creative to make it that better, as opposed to just explaining why it is happening.
Well, and you go on LinkedIn now, and it's talking about, I just hear it all the time. Like, everybody's going to college, everybody's lazy, there's people not working, this and this and that. And my point is to them, like, so what if you're right? What if you're right?
Right.
You're right. You know what? People are lazy. People are going to college. People are not working.
Yep.
They're just not cut from the same cloth as they were 30 years ago from your generation. You're right. And
so what?
What
are we going to do about it?
We've established you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how has that changed our problem? There's no change. Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, come on. Let's.
Well, and I think we even do that a little bit when it comes to, we talk about this workforce problem that we have in construction, right? And the thing I keep hearing, and I was listening to some other Dirt Talk podcasts, right? And in both of them, I think there is this line, well, everybody's encouraged to go to college. I'm like, well, so what? Like,
Okay. Yeah.
it doesn't really matter, right? Like, it's just, there's plenty of people that aren't, right? There's plenty of people also that will go to college and could still end up in construction related fields. So, so what? Yeah, we can blame whoever we want to. It doesn't really matter, though. We ultimately have to move to the spot of responsibility for moving this all forward.
Yeah. And there's a lot of fun talking points that are starting to get me more and more frustrated too. It's like, we need more kids to go to trade schools. We need to promote trade schools. It's like, I agree. Show me the trade schools, because they have been absolutely murdered by higher education. They're wiped out. They don't exist right now.
Mm-hmm.
We need more women in construction. That absolutely. But until you stop requiring 6 days a week, nights, weekends, 70 hours a week, stop saying that. Like, like there's I see like fun talking points that get everybody riled up. Like, yeah, we do need more kids.
Right.
We need more women. More people should think about the trades. And then they go back to doing what they've done for 30 years. It's like, wait a minute.
Right.
But there's great companies out there like you all, like Hoopaw, like Sargent, like CW Matthews, like Emery Sapp & Sons. There's all these great organizations out there that really are doing amazing things to make a difference. And they started, I think the theme with you all that I've seen with any organization is that, hey, the world has changed. It doesn't matter what our opinion on that is. It's reality and it's our problem. So they accept responsibility for the challenge they're looking at. 2, they start to invest, but slowly. So what I heard was, you were not full-time to start. You were a consultant to start. Probably not all that expensive for the impact you were delivering upon the organization. Very low barrier to entry to just start somewhere. And then Highway started to see results. And then they're like, hey, maybe we should go full-time. Maybe we should hire one person to focus on this. And then now what you're saying is we've had extraordinary results. And so as we see more results, more return on investment, we continue to invest. And so your team has grown. So now you've added people to your team doing different functions that you used to be doing in a lesser capacity, but now they can focus on it, which will then, in theory, yield even more results down the road.
That's the hope.
That's the hope.
For sure, right? So, it started with Andrea and bringing her on as kind of talent manager recruiter. That was an area that we knew that we had to focus on. We had the opportunity to bring on somebody internal and had to kind of create a position. But I'm like, she wanted to work kind of remotely. She was on a site, wasn't, but we knew she was Highway, right? Like had the values, had the kind of the grit to do the work that we wanted her to do.
Sure.
And it was like, okay, well, I have tons of work. Let me create a position. And then also let's see what else, how can we help finance out? How can we help just general operations and things of that nature? So we created a role called a field support specialist. And the idea was that person would be kind of a liaison between our team, scary HR, right, and the actual operations, right, and again focusing on that enabling of the work piece. So she came on. She was our field support specialist. She did some other things for a while. It was great until we got really busy about a year ago. Of like, oh boy, we got to really focus here on bringing on even more people. We need to continue to lay down the foundation. We also need some there's an interesting phenomenon I think that happens when you go from, and if you think about it from a connection standpoint, right? 2 people have 1 connection point. 3 people have 3 connection points. 4 people, this is when it starts to go up exponentially, right? It's not just 4 connection points, right? You got to add those 2 in the middle, right? So it's actually 6 and then on and on and on, right? So when you go from having 70 employees, many of which had been around for a long, long time, and you double that with 70 people who are brand new to the organization, think about how many more connection points that is, right? And we sit here and think about communication. That's how the problem manifests itself, right? Is that you have all these connection points, and it just makes it so much more complex.
Well, and that's why the systems that you had at 70,
right,
don't at all work at 150. It's not like
Right.
you just double your systems. Like, okay, double the people, double the system.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
We need new
Everything's
systems.
broken.
We
Yeah.
need to look at how we use those systems differently. So, basically what had happened about a year ago, so we brought on a talent acquisition coordinator, who's Megan, who's doing a great job of just helping Andrea kind of keep things under wraps with as many people as we need to hire and help get people, to that point of getting their offer to when they actually start. And then our original field support specialist, Bert, had the opportunity to, within our company, kind of go to a different role that she wanted to focus on. It was like, great. So then I was able to find, or not find, but I was able to kind of get approval to hire 2 field support specialists that would really they would take that original role, but it would be a little bit more expanded. And I kind of look at them almost as HR business partners in the field. I want them dedicated to sites, and then also doing a lot of project work just around, hey, what are our opportunities as a team, and to kind of build that foundation, continue enabling the work to make this a great place to work. So I was able to bring on Allison and Ben, who are our field support specialists. And then we've also, safety has always been kind of one of my responsibilities. Technology has also been my responsibility. And, we've gone through a couple things in the past year, but we have a safety manager. And then yesterday we had a senior safety manager start. And then also technology, which we had kind of outsourced for a while. We brought back in-house. So we have a technology manager as well. So just our team in terms of like building that, again, to support the business, and what was working at 70 people, this is a little closer to what we need to operate at a 150 and to go beyond that.
Sure.
Right. And think about where we actually do want to head.
And that's what I learned too, is you have to invest in the infrastructure before you go and expand substantially, or else it is just going to kick the shit out of you. And it's going to be painful regardless. I think everybody talks about growth in this very positive, rosy way. Like, you're growing. Anybody that hasn't really been through it, I guess I would say, like, wow, you're growing. That's amazing. Wow, you're hiring so many people. And you're just like, it is amazing. It is so cool to be able to provide a living to somebody and their family. Awesome. And bring them into our organization. However, there are so many, there's just so much pain that's associated with growth. If you don't really plan and invest in that growth before it really happens.
Yeah.
And
it goes back to the luck thing also.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
As you grow, if you're relying a little bit, it's easier to be lucky when you're smaller, right? When you're maintaining. It is much harder to be lucky when you are growing. And again, you have more connection points. You have more responsibility. You have a bigger scope of projects, et cetera, right? That's, you got to work out some of that luck.
Well, and when you're growing in, 150 people, that's a good sized construction company.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a massive construction company, but for your footprint, it's really unique that you have 150 people spread out in so many different states.
Right.
That's very unique, and you have to be a lot more intentional, because you could get away with a lot less if you had 150 people in Columbus, because everybody's kind of interacting with one another. The office is right there, shop's right there. You could get around to every site, every once in a while.
We could have an all hands meeting in one spot.
All hands meeting in the shop. Yeah. Annual safety luncheon, whatever it is.
Right.
You can get away with a little bit more if you're consolidated like that, but you can't miss.
Right.
When you have crews in Raleigh and Charlotte and Nashville and folks in Ohio, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's the going back to the market you guys are in too, from a growth standpoint. It's really amazing what's happening with U.S. airports.
Yep.
They're all growing. If anybody's been to an airport recently, you'll notice that it's probably under construction. No matter where you are,
right?
It's under construction.
And if it's not under construction now, there's plans to have it be under construction very soon. Yeah.
Yes.
Columbus is in that realm right now too. They're talking about building, basically. The way I look at it is basically they want to just tear down the existing terminal, which are kind of like 3 concourses.
Yeah.
And just build a new one.
Yeah, it's pretty old. I've flown in there a few times. Well,
yeah. don't disparage Columbus.
I
I
know.
love flying in and out of there.
I've never
though.
had a problem.
I
flying
show
in and out
up
of Columbus.
like 10 minutes before I'm supposed to board. I'm there.
Yeah. It's like Richmond is another one that's just so easy to get in and out of. Raleigh used to be that way, not anymore.
Yeah, Raleigh's getting a little more populated now.
But yeah, with and especially, I think what's caught the airports off guard, especially on the East Coast, is the migration patterns completely shifting.
Oh yeah,
within the United States, and so you have all these people from New York and Chicago and Boston and Philly, like pushing south to Charlotte and Raleigh, Durham, and Columbia, South Carolina, and so then all of the airports, their traffic is expanding faster than they planned for.
Right.
And now Nashville's a great example. They go build over $1 billion in new airport. And before that initial project is completed, it was like 1.5 or 2 or whatever it was. It was up in the billions. Before that is completed, they say, we've already exceeded our projected passenger traffic. And so here's another $1.5 billion for more airport. And we didn't want to do it, but this is just out of hand, guys. Like, go take your bachelorette parties elsewhere, because we just give us a few years. And now, like the airport, brand new airport, they're building. Now they're going to go build a whole bunch more onto it. Right. Which it's just nonstop.
I find airports fascinating from that standpoint of that it is a very complex system. So it's not only about where population is shifting, morphing, kind of like an amoeba, especially but then there's the business aspect of the airlines, right? And the hubs. Yeah. And I don't know enough about air travel and airports and all that to make an intelligent statement here, but I'm going to assume that there is kind of this emphasis on super hubs, right? Yes. That's what it really feels like, especially at Charlotte. Like that place, that's American Airlines,
100%.
Right? The fact that any other airline flies in there is just, they're kind of like tucked over in, the couple of A gates. And it's like, oh, that's a Delta plane. What's going on, right? And even Southwest here in Nashville, to some extent, right? And even though they don't quote unquote have hubs, come on, it's a hub. Yeah. But I think that, it's a very interesting phenomenon in terms of how people travel. And I think COVID also probably made that even more complex, that there wasn't a lot of travel for a while, and then there's pent up demand for travel, but then there's also the ability for people to travel more. Oh, I can go to and live in Malibu for a month and work there in my job in Arkansas, right? So I think that's a really interesting kind of just phenomenon, the complexities of how those airports are growing, and then how much work. And then as they get smarter and smarter about the efficiencies of getting planes in and out. And, all this stuff adds up to obviously a great deal of work for us that we have the opportunity to bid on here over the next probably 10 to 20, even more years if we really wanted to. Yeah. But just where we are right now, and kind of, we probably did get lucky in some of the places that we're working in right now, that we picked these and we developed these relationships in high growth markets. We knew some of it was coming, right? But I don't know if we knew it was happening to this extent in some of the places where we're at.
And it just doesn't seem like it's slowing down at all. It's so crazy.
The influx of infrastructure money too is incredibly beneficial, right? Because as opposed to just waiting for the FAA to say, oh yeah, we'll fund that project, right? It's just this little extra kick of like, they're going to fund that project. We know it's going to happen. Yeah, there might be a little bit of a wait here, but it's much more certainty for us. Positive thing.
Yeah, and I've been at so many brand new airports too. Like, I was at O'Hare the other day, and walk in, it's just kind of like shitty, and then just opens up into this extraordinary brand new terminal. It's like, where did this come from? Like, where am I right now? Or I flew into Dallas Fort Worth one time. I've been in Dallas Fort Worth hundreds of times at this point.
Yep.
I fly into this one terminal. I'm like, where am I? What is going on here? And this is like, we just kind of updated this whole brand new terminal. Kansas City has a brand new airport. San Francisco has a brand new airport. LaGuardia is brand new. It's just
LAX.
Newark.
LaGuardia.
It's nonstop.
It's crazy.
It's nonstop. But I fly so much too. This is since we're talking about airports, here's a friendly travel tip. Airline loyalty is stupid. It's not a thing anymore. It died in 2020.
Yep.
And if you're hanging on to it, you are playing the wrong game. I am a big supporter in choosing whatever airline can get you there direct.
Yes.
Eliminate connections because that's where you're going to get screwed.
I used to be a Delta guy. I haven't flown Delta, unfortunately, in a long time, but I still imagine that it's a much better travel experience than many other airlines.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
However, you know, so I live in the Columbus area. We've got jobs in Charlotte, Nashville.
Mm-hmm. So Southwest is great.
Southwest to Nashville.
Direct.
And I have to fly American to Charlotte because it's
nonstop.
That's right. It's a direct flight.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh man, I got to go to Raleigh. Where do I have to connect through? Oh, what's the lesser of all the evils? Do I go through Atlanta and fly on Delta, or do I go through Charlotte on American? Maybe I should just drive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I 100% agree. It is just focus on where you can get directly and just do it.
It is.
Right.
It is. I used to get bumped all the time. I was all about American Airlines.
Yeah.
And then I would be flying through Charlotte or DFW, one of those stupid airports, every week. And I just stopped doing that. And now it's amazing. I fly Delta, I fly United, I fly Southwest, American. Right. Whoever can get me there direct, that's who has my business. Yep. And there's also, I love this, people under the illusion that they have a choice when it comes to air travel. It's like saying you have a choice when it comes to riding the bus.
Right.
No. You don't actually have a choice. Like, it's all a game fixed for this, to like, if I want to fly out of Nashville, I'm typically on Southwest, maybe American, but if I'm flying American, I'm going through Dallas. You don't have a choice. Right. So just stop with all that.
Right.
And just go direct. It will save you so much time and frustration. So that's your airport tip of the day.
Love it. Agree.
You guys have an added complexity, and I have to stop by 10:30 for a technology check. But you guys have an added complexity too from a recruiting standpoint. I know a lot of companies have struggled with drug testing and weed. That is a big thorn in a lot of people's sides with drug testing, getting people to pass drug tests, pre-employment, and it's almost always marijuana, and you have to boot them out. You're working at airports, so you need people to pass background checks as well?
Yes.
Has that been a problem for you all? Drug testing or background checks? Or
so
not really.
Of all the problems we have, I would not say it's up there on the list of, oh my God, we've got to do something about this. I can't believe it.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. Has it been somewhat of an issue? Yes. I'd say the harder part is figuring out how to deal with it all. Right.
Yeah.
So on the drug testing thing, I agree. The weed, the THC element is going to get I think it's going to get more and more interesting here over the next probably 5 years. Right. As more and more states move to legalize, as, just quote unquote supplements like Delta 9 and Delta 8 become more prevalent. And I mean, you can walk into any smoke shop and you can buy THC basically, and it's legal. And, as long as you're over a certain age, partaking in that is completely legal. That doesn't mean that you're going to pass a drug screen. It doesn't mean that you will necessarily get a job because of that. But I do think that there's probably going to be an inflection point, especially with THC, just kind of like there was with alcohol, right? And I even overheard people talking about this at a safety event in the Columbus area of, unless if you have reasonable suspicion to believe that that person is actually under the influence right now of a certain drug, namely THC, you should probably avoid, like, it's almost like you don't want to know the answer, right? Because it's going to stay in your system.
Yes.
So I think we're going to get to a point here where when we look at a standard 5 or 10 panel drug screen, probably where there is a lot more discretion made, or there's a higher cutoff value, or, whatever. I can't speak to the lab pieces of that. But I also think that, and I really hope that our drug screen providers start focusing more on current intoxication, right? As opposed to what's been in your system for weeks and weeks. Now, do I want somebody that's doing meth? Then probably not,
Yeah,
right?
there's a line somewhere.
Yeah, there's got to be a line, and that line might be meth or cocaine or one of those.
Yeah.
But no, I really hope that drug screen providers, there's more options for actually doing, like the test of, are you currently intoxicated? I know saliva tests, I think, are better at doing that than urine-based drug screens or, blood tests or whatever. So
is it driven by the insurance companies primarily? Like, where's
the drug screening thing?
Yeah. Where does that come from?
I should probably know much better of where it does come from. I think in general, it's obviously if you're DOT regulated, there's a lot of, kind of the federal standards that are associated with that. I would say in general, our project owners wouldn't want people that have, positive drug screens actually working on their sites because there's a huge liability issue there, which would probably ultimately go back to insurance.
Yes. I think it's a CYA thing. In a
Probably.
lot of ways. Yeah.
The drug screens, though, we actually haven't had a huge issue. And I'm trying to, I don't look at all of them. I know that some of them, get sent out or rejected or, there's not immediate. We do a lot of rapid drug screens because of the way that we have people start pretty quickly. And sometimes, or it's a non-negative result, gets sent out. We never really figure out what actually happened, or it just kind of drops off the radar. Or that person doesn't show up or whatever. But, from, marijuana and detecting that, we haven't had a ton of people that we've had to reject based on that. There have been some other drugs that have gotten caught, but actually not a huge percentage or number.
Okay.
So again, I think we're probably pretty lucky there, but, and again, I do not advocate for this, but I will say it. And I'm stealing somebody else's line, right? Passing a drug screen these days is just an IQ test.
Yeah.
If you want to pass a drug screen, you can pass a drug screen.
Yes.
I don't know how. That seems like a lot of work for me to actually figure out what I would need to do. So we have to trust our labs. We have to trust, our other screening processes that we go through with people to make sure that we're getting them, people that aren't currently intoxicated or whatnot. But I think that if people want to pass a drug screen, they can.
On that note, there was a company that I read about in Colorado that would basically say, we can drug test you now or in 2 weeks. It's your choice. And if they said now and failed, it weeded them out like that. They're just
no pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. No pun intended. But it was like, okay, you're not smart enough to say, I'll just wait the 2 weeks.
I will take those 2 weeks. Yeah. I will get clean for you.
And they didn't hold it against you or anything. They gave you the option, and that in itself was a pre-employment screening of sorts.
Right.
And it's like, I like that.
Yeah.
I think that's clever. They still drug tested, but they just, here's the option.
Right.
But I'm not advocating for it. I don't know how that holds legally, but it's like, it's clever.
Right.
Yeah.
And, again, I think if we try to be reasonable with all of that, right, and make sure that we are giving people the benefit of the doubt. And, if you get diluted samples or whatnot, it's often a retest, but, we'll try to be reasonable with some of that. Post-accident, we do a lot of drug screens that way. I think we're pretty lucky we don't get a lot of people caught in that sense. And then whatever happens with randoms and doing all that.
Yeah.
We've been pretty fortunate here over the past several years. I know that, and I think companies, probably depending on where you work and the kinds of employees that you're getting or where they're actually coming from, can also create additional problems when it comes to drug screening. And just the rate of positive results that you get. But we've been pretty lucky here in the past, at least since I've been there.
I got you.
Not any major issues with drugs.
Yeah.
The background check thing is also very interesting because in order to get badged, and to set foot in, an airfield operation area, the AOA, like you really need to have a pretty. Obviously, you can't have been treasonous or, tried to hijack a plane at any point in your life.
Which
but
is reasonable.
I think that's probably reasonable. But there's minor offenses, right, when it comes to weapons and drugs and,
like if I had a DUI, Would I
DUIs are okay.
Oh, okay. I got you.
No, again, wouldn't say we encourage them. That has implications, though. Can you drive on the airfield?
Oh, sure.
Right?
Okay.
Can you drive one of our vehicles? That's an
gotcha.
insurance issue.
Yeah.
But just in terms of getting badged, it's more of the the kind of the high crimes and misdemeanors element of you have a felony that's related to weapons, drugs, hijacking planes.
Yeah. So it's
interfering
with
transportation, things of that nature.
So you don't have to be squeaky clean.
No, you don't have to be.
I guess it depends.
Yeah. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, we look at everybody's background. We run a background check on everybody, and there are some that are somewhat questionable. And we do have to. We really have to take a look at that and be like, okay, well, first of all, do we feel comfortable having that person on the airfield, right? If our project, like, if we weren't on the airfield, we probably would, right, with some offenses. But then there's also the element of if they need to get a badge, their employment is kind of dependent on that.
Sure.
So and we don't make that decision, right? That's up to the airport and doing their background check and having them actually apply for that badge to see. But we try to do as much pre-screening as possible, make sure that we are not, putting people that are going to be putting other people at risk on the airfield. So that's an overall very complex world too. And there's legal implications with it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you get into tough choices, and I would say we typically make the right ones of, man, I really wish that guy or that gal didn't have that on the record, right? Because we really could use them right now, but we can't employ you at this time.
I got you. Yeah. It's, I don't think I've talked about it very much, but I've heard a lot of people bring it up, especially as everything is just more and more constrained. And it's really hurt a lot of people that I think would be very employable otherwise. Yeah. But because of a drug screening or something, they just can't get hired at some of these places.
Yeah. I'm big on also giving people a chance. Yeah. And that's probably to my detriment sometimes. Yeah. But in terms of, okay, you had a felony 10 years ago. It's not really recent. It's not really relevant to what we do. I still think you're probably employable.
Sure.
Right. We'll give you a chance. Now, we don't even say, well, we're going to be watching you. Right. But if something happens that's against our values, against our principles, against the law, whatever, we'll deal with it at that time. We'll take on that responsibility.
Yeah. Well, if somebody, I guess to wrap up here, since I have to do this damn test, not drug test, different test.
Different kind of test.
How do people find you all? If I'm sitting here saying, oh, I want to go to work for Highway, where do they find you?
So highwaypaving.com, our website. We've got a section on there. Our careers, our jobs are all posted on there. You can read about other people's experiences. We're actually, looking at really trying to expand that out this year as well. Nice. But yeah, that would be the best place to reach us. Highwaypaving.com, hiwaypaving.com.
Excellent.
No GH in that high.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Thanks for the clarification there. Well, thanks for stopping by on your tour across the country.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk. It's fun.
Sure. Yeah.